Betty, say hi to all your friends. You know what I can do to get you to smile? So when we take your picture, you know, some people say cheese. Not everybody likes cheese, so I really don't know why they do that, right? But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change this for just a second. I'm going to see what this does. Okay, ready? Say cookie. That made a smile. For you, it's a big smile because you're doing a great job with your... Now, just for fun, I want everybody to understand that this is being with us every Saturday at 3 o'clock. That's not the only thing you do during the week, right? Yeah, you do more than just be on this broadcast, right? And one of the other things you do is that you sell cookies. But you know what I love about you? You have never, ever in your entire life ever been a monster. So that means that you've never been a cookie monster. But what you do, sweetheart, you show everybody that you love Jesus. Now, for just a moment, I want you to think about the difference between being patient and not being patient. If somebody looked at you and they said, Betty, you are not being very patient, what would that mean?
I'm not patient.
Yeah, and not being patient means wanting what I want when I want it, and that's right now. Is that right? Yes, that's the way people act when they're being impatient. Well, see, I know it. Everybody now knows what it looks like to be impatient. Like right now, what do we have? We have people during the pandemic who are being very impatient. Yeah, now I don't mean to say that we shouldn't be concerned, but we should sometimes enjoy the time we have with each other. So today I'm going to talk about a man who is oftentimes talked about because when somebody is a patient person, they'll look at that person and say, you have the patience of Job. So what's the name of our hero for this week? Job. Yes. Well, let's go. Once upon a time, there was an amazing man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. Now, Betty, how would you like to say that your hometown is Uz? Well, the one thing that would be fun about it is it only has 2 letters, so it'll be easy to spell. But he was an amazingly good man, and hold on to this. He had 7 sons, 3 daughters, a beautiful wife, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen, 500 donkeys, and an incredible number of servants. Now, would you say that that is a poor man or a rich man? I think that's exactly right. I think so. And he prayed for his children all the time, especially after they had some really wild parties. That's all I'm going to say. Now, you may remember that Satan is a fallen angel. He was kicked out of heaven. And sometimes he's called Lucifer. Or the devil. Yes. Yes. And you may remember, as I said, that he was thrown out of heaven. So that meant that he hung out with other angels. Well, one day, some angels went before God And the fallen angel, Satan, tagged along with them. Yeah. The Lord looked at Satan and said, well, where did you come from? And Satan said, I've been everywhere, all over the earth. Now, that's not good news. So the Lord stared at Satan and said, well, with all that wandering around, have you bumped into my very faithful and very special man named Job? There's absolutely nobody in the whole world like him before anyone. And Satan said, well, no wonder he has so much, since you've given him a charmed life by always protecting him. Satan went on to say, but the truth is, if you strike down everything he has and destroy everything that's important to him, in no time at all, he will curse you to your face. Yep, he would. Yep, that's what Satan said would happen. So the Lord said to Satan, well, you know, that's because that's the way most people act. If they don't get from God what they want, they really get angry. Well, so the Lord said to Satan, okay, go ahead. Everything he has is in your hands, but don't harm my friend Job. So then Satan left. Well, next thing that happens is one day Job's kids were having another one of their big wild parties. And a messenger came in and said, Job, I have some really bad news for you. You know all of your oxen and your donkeys and your servants? Well, guess what? Some of your enemies came and attacked them and carried them all off. Yep, now it gets worse. Fire came from heaven and burned up your sheep. And if that wasn't bad enough, some more of your enemies came and stole your camels. Well, by then, things looked pretty bad for Job. But it got worse. Oh, well. While Job's children were together having another one of their wild parties, a big strong wind came in and it blew the house down, which fell on top of Job's children, and all of them were killed. Now, of course, Job was shocked and very sad. Now, we know what happens in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when people are sad. So he shaved his head. He tore his clothes.
And put ashes on his.
That's right. Put ashes all. That's exactly right. And so he fell to the ground, sad and upset. But he looked up to heaven and he praised God anyway. And he said, I came into the world naked. I will leave the world naked. And the Lord is given, and the Lord has taken away. Praise the name of the Lord. And in spite of all that he had lost, Job kept on loving and trusting God. But things get worse.
What happens this way?
Well, once again, the angels came to visit the Lord, and Satan apparently heard about it and came along too. Once again, the Lord asked Satan, where have you come from? And once again, Satan explained that he had been everywhere in the earth. And once again, the Lord praised Job. And once again, Satan said, strike his flesh and bones, and he'll start cursing you to your face. Once again, the Lord said, okay, but spare his life. Well, you know Satan. He never stops tormenting people. And the next thing you know, Job had sores all over his whole body.
Oh, gosh.
Now Job's wife was really, really upset. And she told her husband that he should curse God and then die. Job told his wife that this was a foolish thing for her to say. In fact, he said to her, shall we accept good from God and not accept trouble too? So Job kept on loving God. Now, Betty, do you have any friends? I think you do, don't you, Betty?
Yes, I have a lot. I thought you were going to say, do you have any friends that blah, 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 blah?
Well, here's I know you were looking for more. Just for fun, can you name 3 of your best friends? That's good. And I know you have even more. So Job had three best friends. And they came so that they could visit Job because they heard about all this trouble. But when they were walking up together, guess what? They looked and they saw this man who looked terrible. Shaved head, ashes all around his torn clothes. And they didn't know who it was. And then suddenly they said, whoa, that's Job. Well, they were really shocked to see how bad he looked. And they began to mourn. They got to really feeling sorry. So you know what they did? Well, I'll bet you do, because remember, they're Jews and it's the Old Testament. And what do people do when they're really upset? They rip their clothes, put ashes all over themselves, and then they sat down with Job for 7 days and 7 nights, and they simply did not know what to say, so they just sat with him and said nothing. Well, finally, when Job began to talk, he cursed the day of his birth, and when he started talking about it, it sounded more like a long poem or a song. Yeah, then each of his three friends spoke, and what they said sounded like a poem or a long song. And each time one of them finished, Job responded with another long poem that was like a song. There was a lot of long stories and a lot of poems in that book. In fact, some of Job's words are so popular that we even hear them at funerals. Like, and here's one of them, man born of woman leaves is of a few days and full of trouble. He springs up like a flower and withers away like a shadow that leaves pretty quickly. He sure doesn't last too long. Yeah, it's a little bit different at the funerals, but it's a little bit like that. So Job also added that his spirit was broken and his days are cut short. He was really upset with his life, but he kept on believing in God. He even said, how long will you torment me? Now, Job had heard a lot from his three friends, but he really wanted to hear something from God. He even said this, Betty. He said, oh God, listen carefully to my words. Is my complaint directed towards man? Why shouldn't I be impatient? Job really wanted to hear from God. Have you ever wondered if God was listening to you? I think some people do that in life, Betty. You sometimes pray and wonder if God's listening? Some people wonder about that.
I do.
Yeah, and it happens. Well, Job had lost just about everything and everybody, but he was still praying and he was still listening. Another thing that he said means a lot to people in their life when he said, and this is what he said, if only I knew where to find him, God. If only I could go to his dwelling. Well, every time Job said something else, each one of his friends had more words to share with him. Words, words, words.
Wait,
Sometimes.
does he still have his wife?
Yeah, she's still there. I think she's in the background. I don't think she wants to hang out with him. So every time one of his friends came with more words to share, but sometimes when we see people suffering, we really don't know what to say to them to make them feel any better. But Job's friends didn't run out of words. In fact, what they were kind of saying was, well, what can we do for you? And he didn't really know. They kept trying to make Job feel better. They even tried to take his side on some of his complaints. And they did a little bit of complaining too. But eventually they ran out of words. And they could see that Job was saying a lot of good things and was saying to them that he thought he was doing the right things. Well, but there was a man standing by listening and watching. His name was Elihu. Want to say his name, Betty? Elihu. Yay, you got it. Well, Elihu didn't like some of the things that Job or his three friends were saying, so he got a bit angry. At first, he had been afraid to say anything because he was younger than the four of them. But he went ahead once they were all finished talking, and he said to them, "Looky here. I'm young, and you are old-timers. And you three friends have not said what you should have been saying to Job. Now listen to me, Job, instead of them." But here it is, Elihu said, "You are wrong." Imagine that young man saying that to those old-timers. He says, "God is greater than man. Why did you complain to him? God's speaking even when we people don't hear him. He speaks in dreams, and he speaks in visions. He chastens people with pain. God does incredible things. Twice, 3 times, telling people to turn back from the pit so that the light of life might shine upon them. Pay attention, Job," he said, "and you three, listen up. Far be it from God to do evil, from the Almighty to do wrong? I don't think so. He repays a man for what he has done. He brings upon him what he deserves." Well, Elihu said a lot of things to Job and to his 3 buddies. And even though Elihu was such a young man, these 4 did not open up their mouths. He said, "Job, listen, stop for a moment and look at God's wonders. Do you know how God controls the clouds in the sky, makes the lightning flash? So, Job, what did you make along with God? Where were you 4 when God created everything that you get to enjoy every day?" Well, sir, guess who spoke? Think about this, Betty. Guess who spoke after Elihu was finished lecturing Job and his 3 pals? Can you even imagine? I think you probably guessed it. God himself started to speak. Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, all this time, here are these 3 friends along with Job complaining that God never talks. And here's this young man saying, "Well, that's because you never listen." Well, God suddenly, I know, Betty, it's enough to make me faint and fall off my chair too. I have to be careful though, because I might bang my head into the stained glass window. So, what happened is, now we have God saying, "Hey, stand up like a man and listen, Job." Like Elihu was saying, "Where were you when I was creating everything in the world?" Well, just in case Job and his 3 buddies had forgotten, there are several long chapters in the book of Job where God's talking out loud. Yeah. And he reminds Job and Job's 3 friends about everything that they have. They were spending so much time talking about what they didn't have. But do you remember the beginning, Betty, when I told you all the things that Job had? Did we decide he had a lot more than just about anybody else in the world? Yeah, that's pretty much what we decided. But what had happened is, Job and his 3 friends were now saying that they didn't have anything. But, they have each other, Betty. Thank you. And they still looked up and they saw the clouds and they saw the sky and they saw the sun and the moon and the stars. Well, what happens? It goes on to say, they had been so busy talking about what Job had lost that they had forgotten about what Job still had. Finally, after God made all these really good points, Job opened his mouth. Job said, "Lord, I'm not worthy. How can I respond to anything you have said? In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hands over my big fat mouth." Yep. But it looks like Job had interrupted God before God had made all of his points. So God said to Job, hold on. I will question you, and you will answer me. Well, Job got a real lesson that day from God. And since God is perfect, you know that God preached a perfect sermon. And he didn't even need a pulpit, because God can preach wherever he wants and whenever he wants about whatever he wants. But once it looked like God had finished, Job tried again to say something. He said, I know that you can do all things, and nobody can stop what you want to do. You've really asked me some tough questions, like who won't listen to you, especially when they don't know what they're talking about. Well, Lord, I don't know what I'm talking about. But now that I have heard your voice, I will never forget. Now that I've been listening carefully to you, I feel really terrible about the things that I was saying. But that's not all, folks. No, that's not all. You think things are going to get better or worse, Betty? And the correct answer is better. Just like the first 4 letters of your name. Is that why Betty and better are so close? Because you're better? All right. Well, God then spoke to Job's buddies and told them that they should have had something respectful to say, just like Job had said. That's all right.
I said,
I know. Better Betty. I love it. Well, God also told these 3 buddies, since you didn't get it right, you dudes, you better learn how to say your prayers and then ask Job to pray for you, because you need Job's prayers very badly. So, Job had a special worship time for his friends, and he prayed for his friends, and after that you'll never imagine what happened. Can you remember everything that Job used to have? Think about it, Betty. Children, animals, servants. Well, hold on to your seat. God gave back to Job double of what he had before. Yep. Yes. And when Job's friends and families came to visit Job and have a big feast, they not only got a big meal, but they went home with a gift from Job.
Did he get his kids back?
Oh, you hold on. Suddenly, because God loved Job so much, Job had 14,000 sheep. That's a lot of wool. 6,000 camels. That's a lot of humps. 1,000 oxen. 1,000 donkeys. That's a lot of hee-haws, right? He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And everyone agreed that Job had the most beautiful daughters that anyone had ever seen. And Job gave his daughters a big inheritance, just like he did with his sons. Plus, Job lived to be 140 years old. Yep. And he was able to see his children. I know, 140. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to look like when I'm 140, just like that empty chair. Oh, there she comes. And he's able to see his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, and his great-great-grandchildren. Now, that's what happened to the man who never stopped loving God, even when he complained, and even when his friends did not help. So, Job died a very happy man, and nobody ever wondered whether he loved God or if God loved him. And so, Betty, that's the story of Job. So the next time somebody looks at you and says you have the patience of Job,
Okay.
I want you also to remember something else. Please, honey, never forget this.
Okay.
And even if I'm not around to tell you this, I never want you to forget this. If you put your trust in God, if you always love Him, and if you always believe in Him, He will never, ever desert you. I love you, dear. Thanks, Ben. Bye, honey. And remember, have a really happy cookie day.